Well, it's already 8:02 here, so I want to appreciate everybody joining in this evening. So what I'm going to do is just do like a quick warm up here while people are kind of joining in. If you want to share, you can share. So the warm up question for this evening is going to be, let me do my desktop here. Can everybody see what the warm up icebreaker is? What's something you purchased in the past year that you could not live without? So getting away from R here for a little bit. But what's something that you purchased in the past year that you could not live without? Anybody have any ideas?
This is a first world problem, but I bought a second monitor and it's just so much bigger than my current laptop. And so I feel like things just wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't be as productive without it now.
That I plus one that. And the best part about that is like my work, we bought like the bigger ones, like bigger monitors so that you can have three code notebooks open at the same time. That's a game changer. Like at home, I only have two that I can fit two on each. But when I got three, 10 times.
Yeah, I'm tempted to get one more.
Yeah, I agree with you. Plus one on that one. Who else? Anybody else have anything?
I was going to say the same thing. I got an ultra wide at home now, like one of the 34-inch ones, and that really nice. So I have like one portrait and one ultra wide. It's working well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Anybody else? I'm gonna go on I guess this technology route as well. I bought my fiance bought me, so I didn't technically buy it, but I bought a Kindle Paperwhite. It's just one of those, just a basic Kindle, like it just doesn't have anything on it, because I was feeling like every time I like read my phone, it's just like I always don't focus on reading. It's like I want to like shift around and look at different stuff. So I'm just like, I'm gonna buy one of these, just very basic, low capabilities, and it's helped me focus more on like just reading like books. And so I think that's been like the best thing that I've gotten this year. So anybody else? Nobody else? All right, cool. Well, I think we'll get started for this evening. Oh, Aaron, you got something to share? I saw you unmute there for real quick.
I was hesitant to say, because it's definitely something I can live without. It just like I got a nicer desk, which has improved my I guess the quality of my life significantly.
Anything that you could do for your workflow, you could live without it, but like I will say, like this chair that I'm sitting in, like I bought like a nicer chair. Yeah, I could live without it, but like this chair that I bought just makes your life so much better. So anything you do like workflow wise, like desk and stuff, totally in on that as well. So all right, great. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody here. All right, cool. Well, I think we'll get started for this evening. So Rex has graciously taken on the speaking responsibilities for this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to be covering Chapter 5, Fundamental and Development Workflows. And so just a couple of reminders, if anybody has any questions, don't be afraid to ask any questions at any time, or if they have any comments, just let Rex know. And then, I'll just turn it over to you, Rex.
Cool. Thanks. I'll share screen. So all right, we're on 5. Okay, so talking about package development workflow, and the main things here are when and how to make an R package, using them with RStudio, why not to mess with convention regarding your working directory, and how to test drive code. So for that first part, I don't think it's worth making a package necessarily if there's already one that does like 99% of what you want to do. Unless your main objective in doing it is to learn how to make a package, in which case that's a payoff in itself, and that's really worthwhile. So making sure that there's not something existing, and if there is, and what you want to add is just something small, then you could potentially contact the creators or the maintainers and ask them to like contribute, or whether you could like make a change. I've certainly done that very recently. There's this package called cut.r, and I wanted to pretty much just add another metric to their like huge suite of metrics, but it required something that I couldn't quite do at the time. So I just DM'd the guy on Twitter, and like within a couple of weeks, he's like, "Oh yeah, you can do it now. Like just get the new version on Crayon." So that's that was a lot easier and endless compared to like forking his package and then doing all the changes, trying to understand the massive work that is already done, just so I can add my little bit. So yeah, I think probably people that are involved in developing packages are pretty on board with people showing an interest in wanting to make a change or suggesting a change. So yeah, there's definitely payoffs in terms of like learning, and also just being more efficient in future work. Like if you have a set of functions that you use for each of the projects, then maybe it's worthwhile packaging that up and making that a bit more repeatable. So when you're, this is really context specific, but there's some considerations when developing a package. For example, if you have a package which fits some models, maybe using some novel approach, then users are likely to have some expectation about functionality, so that it behaves similarly to other modeling packages. Like for example, a lot of packages use the LME4 style of your formula, in terms of like having, you know, your fixed effects and your random effects, and just sort of like the way of setting out those that style. And also they're probably going to expect that you have some generic functions like plot or predict, because if you didn't have those, then people might be like just expecting it and starting using these functions which don't exist, and then being confused when it doesn't work. So there is this hard hat package which helps the developer follow best practices for developing modeling related packages, and so that it can be used within like the tidy models sort of ecosystem. And this note is also about like using generics that the user might expect from using similar packages. A really good example of this is like in spatial. There's like set of spatial analysis packages. They all sort of work together really well and don't overlap too much, like using GDAL and SF and yeah, all these different packages that sort of work together. And I guess they must have communicated and planned that ahead, rather than just thinking that their package is going to come in and rule them all, you know. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. Naming conventions have sort of changed a lot over the past, I don't know, however long. You can check out this link that has all the packages that are on Crayon, and make sure that you have a novel name before creating the package, before even starting to develop the package, because if you use a package name that you're going to change, then that can be a little bit painful after you've already developed it. There's some rules in what can be put on Crayon for package names. So pretty much there's no underscores or hyphens or periods at the end. But although these are the only laws, there's sort of like some recommendations, such as not using periods at all, names that are easy to Google, for example, and not really like long ones. Currently, and don't use packages which are available somewhere else, because that could just be confusing. There's no NumPy or Pandas package on Crayon. that might just, I don't know, not meet expectations if you made a NumPy package to do something totally unlike NumPy and Python. Use all lowercase where possible. This is sort of novel. You'll notice a lot of packages don't abide by that. I think that's sort of the most recent habit or convention. Abbreviations are a good thing. For example, I wouldn't want to come up with a really long package name to represent this when BRMS is nice and concise. Adding capital R's for fun, although that's maybe conflicting with 0.4, but a lot of people do that anyway. And not getting sued. For example, there's no Facebook or Dropbox or Apple on Crayon. For example, we can just look Facebook, and yeah, there's no Facebook. There's just our Facebook or our Facebook stat. So yeah, that don't get sued by copying a big company's name who has money for lawyers and what have you. This is a really fun. Sorry, the zoom's in the way. Blog post by Nick Tierney, and about naming things and sort of like the history of how things have been named and now sort of modern conventions. So check that out. There's also, like GG set of packages where, people have obviously built packages which interact nicely or similarly to ggplot2. And they've sort of got a convention with naming them, starting with the GG. And yeah, that's sort of a fun article. You should check that one out. And he's also got a guide on renaming packages when you've made a mistake and decided to change things. So yeah, if you want an entertaining article on that, that's also useful. So creating a package. You can run this code from the console, and this will make things. Or you can, in RStudio, just go like File, New Project, and then select it as a package. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I mean, if you're already in RStudio, let me just open a new RStudio. If you're already in RStudio, then it's going to like ask you for the directory of the new package, and you're already in some working directory. So I don't think that's nearly as convenient to use the use this method compared to going like new project, new directory, package name, and then just browsing for your directory. I think that's a lot easier. But the other way you could do it is like if you did want to use the use this call, you could go to the directory where you want to put the package. Oops, sorry, and then run it like that, and that'll create the package. But it doesn't actually do everything there. So when you do it, when you do the create a new project and then make a new package from RStudio, then you also get the project file. So I'm going to skip ahead briefly. Oh, that is the wrong one. So the trick is here. If you use RStudio, after you've made the new package. Oh, did I just put that in the wrong spot? Totally messed up. Anyway, that works. I did it before. If you do the use RStudio after you've made the package, oh, I totally need to be in the directory. I totally need to be in the directory. Okay, so once I go in here, and then I can run that, And then it makes the new package, it makes a project file and all this other stuff that you would get by default if you had just made it from going file, new project, new package, as I went through before. So my suggestion, just open RStudio and then go through the file, new project approach. So you create a new project, either using this approach and then doing the use RStudio from the terminal or through RStudio, and then get files that we've just made. Do not use this package skeleton approach. And I won't even show you how to do it because you shouldn't do it and we're advising against it. So don't do it. And where to put the package. So I sort of have a, like my documents, and then I'll have like some R packages in our projects. So I sort of keep my, analysis work there and packages sort of distinct, but whatever, people have all sorts of different ways to organize things. That's really up to you and how you organize your work. So there's a lot of benefits in using developing a package within RStudio. You can do it without, like you can use DevTools, or you can do it without, but it's just sort of painful, and I don't think it's as easy or as nice. So the rest of this, I mean, the whole book is designed about using RStudio and DevTools. So I'm just going to pretend that you don't want to do that, and I've just convinced you. So there's all these benefits using RStudio, and we should do that. So the benefits of using RStudio projects to develop are that each project is sort of isolated and the code is contained within the project. And that's sort of like a really nice behavior for developing our package, because your code should be contained within the package. Otherwise, it's sort of like not really a package. It's easy to start up. So once we've made our package here, we can just, open it from the project file, and hey, we've got everything contained and all that files are, within. That's really clean. There are a lot of useful shortcuts in RStudio. So for example, we have well, I know we went through it before, but there's, shortcuts to check and build, and DevTools obviously has a lot of clean commands in the console to do those things as well, but it's sort of nice to use RStudio shortcuts as well. If you hit Alt-Shift-K, sorry, I didn't look up what the Mac users have to do, but Alt-Shift-K brings up all these shortcuts, and that's probably really small to look at, but yeah, maybe on this side, there's all these things of interest, like Control-Shift-D to document, Control-Shift-T to test, Control-Shift-E to check, which we went through, and the Control-Shift-B to install and restart. So yeah, this is probably worth checking out. Often, if you're working in the console, it can be like almost just as easy to write check and then run. But the advantage of using these shortcuts is that they're run in like the build pane. So like it's run here rather than in the console. So you're saving yourself sort of busying up the console when doing a check. I'll get to that later with an example when I show another comparison there. So you make a new R project for, but you may have an existing package that you want to turn into an R project. This is sort of weird because whenever I start a new package, I would definitely start with an R project. You can do that though. If you go through RStudio, you can do the file new project by using an existing directory. And we probably have done that before. We go new project, and rather than saying new directory, go existing directory, and otherwise the exact same. Or you can use this line that I just showed before from the terminal, which sort of recognizes a working directory and turns it into a project by adding those project files. Like when I ran that this last line, it created the .proj, rproj file and the git ignore build ignore. So yeah, and this is just a note about fixing the problem that when you use this create package from the command line, and it doesn't create the .rproj file, using the use RStudio will create it for you, and then you can just open up an RStudio straight away. Oh, thanks Ryan for the Mac shortcut. Okay, so there's a few other little tidbits on our projects. Your R project will have this .rproj file, and this is typically the same as the directory name. So the rproj file, your package name will be the same as the folder name. And I think it's just really nice to stick to convention here. And it is also why it's not as simple of a case as just renaming your package here and then ta-da, your package name is changed. So yeah, just referencing back to this blog post by Nick Tierney about renaming a package. So yeah, because it's all tied into the package, and also like, you know, it's in the description, like your package name. It's not as easy of a thing to do to just rename it in one place. Okay, so the actual .rproj file is just a text file, and you don't need to modify it by hand. You can modify it, and you can do that in RStudio from the project options, which is here. I've never had to actually do that, so I can't think of a case when you would need to, but maybe someone can pipe up and say, I've changed my project file before, and this is why, or not. Yeah, Colin, do you know why?
Yeah, I've changed my project file name, and it's not a good idea. So, I mean, just in my experience, yeah.
Just
But
pain.
anyway, yeah, I just feel like it messes things up because you're mixing up your directory names and you're mixing up your project name, and and then if you're passing that off to somebody else, it's confusing to them. And so, yeah, I would just say don't do it, but I understand the use case for it, but avoid it at all possible.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely perhaps more pain than it's worth, unless you're really certain about you need the name changed. And
I was wondering if this is like a potential, whether like there could be a function in DevTools like change package name, and it will like take care of everything that needs to change wherever.
yeah, that's a good idea. I wonder why they don't have that, actually. I don't know. That seems like a missed opportunity, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's
change.
also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rex.
Oh no, you go.
Well, I think also too, like if you have some file dependencies within your package as well, there might be some issues with that. So like we'll get further on into it, but like using the inst folder and stuff like that, there might be some issues if you are changing your names. You're going to have this mix up of directory, project name, and everything else. And so that might have there might be a detrimental effect to changing it as well. But
yeah,
don't mind me adding, Rex and Colin, the changing the package name, it's a namespace variable issue, right? So all of your pre-configured, pre-packaged, generated names all have this package name. By changing it, you're breaking literally everything. None of your references will work anymore. None of your dev tools will work anymore. I've got a URL that I'm reading real quick while you made that comment, and I don't know if it's credible yet, so I don't want to post the URL just yet, but I haven't found, to Aaron's comment, I haven't found a DevTools option to change globally the package name itself and have it affect the entire namespace paths of all of your package itself. Anyway, just adding to that comment.
yeah, I think the main takeaway is just think hard about the name before you make it in the first place, right? Do your best to not put yourself in a situation where you need to change it. Yeah. So the last point here is that you can just open it up from clicking the R project file. That's really probably something that we've all done for our projects, irrespective of whether it's a package or not. Okay, so RStudio, use this and working directories. Use this sort of expects you to follow a certain convention with the folders that are in your package. For example, I know we already went around this a bit before, but all your R scripts that contains functions and what have you, they live in the R directory. If you have compiled code, then that lives in the source directory. And then if you have vignettes, and that lives in the vignettes directory. Don't call it vignette, thinking that that's what it was meant to be, because it won't run them when you do a check and so on. So just following convention makes things work really nice and make the use this functions work as they should. You can run this proj sitrat site. I don't know how you meant to actually say that, but this checks that all the directories do match up. For example, if I run this in the new package that we made, then it'll say that the active RStudio project is a working directory. It's all the same. Happy days. And I did look at the use this project, and that defaults to the RStudio project if it's not set specifically. So even though it says unset, it'll just match whatever this one is. So similarly, all these helper functions from DevTools rely on the certain things being in the right places. So when you're running document or check or test, it's expecting that when you run check, it's expecting that your documentation are in the man folder. When you're running test, it's expecting that your test scripts are within the test folder, and your vignettes are in the vignettes folder. So using the use this functions to create using the use this set of functions to create new functions, like the use_r call up here. This is making sure that you're sticking to the convention, because it creates a new script within the right place and it opens it up for you. Notice that you're not having to pass in a path here. You're just writing in the name of the file that you want to create. So if I do this, if I want to make a new function, then it'll put it in the right place. It's going to the R directory and make. So I don't need to think about where I'm putting things. It'll just put it in the right spot. So I think end of that story is using the users package to create new files is better than trying to place them where you think they're meant to go, because you might make a mistake. So in test driving package code, this is sort of taken from that graphic that Bryan had in his talk. And it really shows this DevTools load all just going straight from source all the way to memory. And you're sort of bypassing all these sometimes slow steps along the way. And this is actually really cool because it only, it can be really fast. Whereas having to install a package from source takes a while, especially if you have compiled code. I'm going to show you what I mean with this package because it's a big whopper, and there's some compiled code. So if I have a change, say, I don't know, I had a space for no reason in this function, it's going to load DevTools, and I run load all, it's really fast. Happy days. If I make a similarly useless change to the compiled, to the C++ code and hit load all, it has to recompile it. But it didn't have to do that when I only made the change to the R script. It only has to do this when I make changes to the C++ files. So this is like a really quick way to iterate over changes within the package, because if you otherwise had to reinstall every time, like if you were doing a fresh build every time you wanted to test out a change, it would take a long time to iterate and try new things. So that's really, really painful. I'm just going to get rid of that useless change. All right. So I'm just going to have to recompile and think about that. So that's just to say that it is much faster than trying to install from source to go straight to use the load all. And this is now the best way to quickly iterate things. When you have a when you're running tests, that's it running files within your tests folder. So I've got a single test file, and it sort of tests the whole of things with a single data set. It actually runs a load all and then runs a test script. So it does this loading step, and then it runs a test script, and it says congratulations or go back to work, depending on whether they all pass or not. So you don't actually need to run load all and then test. You can just run test and then it'll do it. So yeah, coping with being impatient. So I'm really impatient, and when you run check, it'll take an eternity, especially if you have a lot of compiled code, because it has to like install it on like two systems, run all the examples, run the tests, run like recompile the vignette. It's got a lot of work to do, and that can busy up your console. So that's why it's better to run it in the build pane, because that leaves your console free to, you know, recognize that you have some other issue and, you know, fix it up however you like. Another way, because I'm often not even looking at the build pane, I use the job package, and if I run a check like that, it'll run it in the jobs pane if I have dev tools loaded. That is. So that'll do the same thing, but outside of your console. So much of a muchness, it effectively does the same thing, but I'm really already in the habit of using the job package because I'm not always working on packages, but sometimes other things that are slow. So that's sort of one way to deal with being impatient. To test, so the check function does a lot of work, but you might not necessarily need to assess every aspect of that. For example, it does document, test, it rebuilds the vignettes, and it runs all the examples. You can do some of those separately, and you can run the check without building the vignettes. So just be mindful about what you're editing and where you expect the changes to be. Like, if I'm working on my examples and trying to fix a bug there, I don't need to run a full check. I can just do run examples and make sure it works. If I'm editing some test script, I don't need to run a check to get the test to run. I can just hit test and then it'll just do that section. So these are just sort of ways to avoid having to run everything just to, you know, do a little bit. So I've got a bad habit that I throw in a markdown document because I'm really used to it, to working in R markdown and quickly testing things. So for example, real world example, this package is already pretty big and it's got a lot of mass that goes on. And I was asked to check out, like, what if we did some matrix multiplication between like two of the big elements in here to add some new functionality. So it's easy to throw in some early returns, like so, in the function, running load all. So I'm not having to like rebuild the package. I'm just, and all the tests would break at this point, right? Because the main function is returning early and it's not giving what you'd expect for all the tests to run. But now if I run this, I get to see the outputs that I had before. So within out, I've now got these things that I got from the early return, and I can test to see whether this mass that I'd worked on makes something that makes sense. So in this case, I was trying to see whether I could get covariates out of the model using some math that doesn't make sense to me, but made sense to the person that was helping me with the math. But I think this is a much quicker way to iterate over code without having to take apart the entire package or remake functions outside to quickly edit. If you throw in some early returns and work within a markdown script or a script or however you like to work, this can be a quicker way to do that. But if I ran a test now, it would say it all sucks. So I just need to be mindful about where my returns are and get rid of them.
So Rex, I got a question about this workflow here that you got. So with your returns, so basically you're doing print debugging, right? You're returning the value to the console so you can see what the output is. Why is there a benefit of doing this over maybe a breakpoint or dumping a browser into it and using the debugger? Is there anything is there a benefit above doing that, or?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. I find it easier when I've got all my say I'm up to a certain point within a big function, and I know that I have to figure out some interaction between a handful of objects. I find it easier to export those objects into an environment with nothing else, and then just dicking around to find out what I need to continue the function with the right objects that I expect to be there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, certainly you could use a debugger or some other approach.
Yeah, because
I guess I'm used to this approach where I sort of use this approach when I do my normal analysis outside of an R package. So I've sort of just stuck with it. But that might not be the best approach.
I was just wondering, I mean, print debugging is a strategy to debug it, right? You print your stuff to your console to see what's getting outputted from your functions and stuff. And so it was just surprising to me because my workflow is a little bit different because, I'll either use the breakpoints. So if you put if you go over onto the lines, the line numbers, and you click on the line numbers over on there, it will put a little breakpoint on it. And so that when you run the function, what it will do is it will stop at that specific point and then dump you into a debugger in your console so you can start interacting with the objects within it. So that's my normal workflow. I mean, you can also use a browser, you could dump a browser function into it, and then it will, in your console, will turn into an interactive debugger. But I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just different workflows. So I was it was interesting to see the early return. So I was just wondering if there was a benefit over that or not. So interesting.
Probably not. Probably not. Yeah, no, because for example, I might have just broken the rest of this, but need to recreate it. And I might, sort of keep the necessary objects that I need and then recreate the rest of the section of code I need in the markdown script. But certainly you can do that in the console using a breakpoint or a browser. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of the end of it. That was much faster than I thought it would be. But yeah, I guess a note that if you have these markdown files, then when you run a check, it'll give you a note to say like, you know, you've got a non-standard file in your top directory. But if you don't push that to GitHub, then you're fine. And if you put it, if you ignore it within your rbuild ignore file, then you're also fine, and it won't even bother giving you this note. So yeah, I just tend not to push it to GitHub ever, because it's always just full of crap that I'm only using in the session that I'm working on it. So yeah, that's it. Are there any questions, or do you want to chat about anything in more depth? I probably just like ran through that a bit quicker than necessary.
I'm gonna remain quiet for a little bit just in case people have questions. So a couple things that I was thinking about too was like I'm thinking about my workflow a little bit too. And again, like I don't have as much package development experience as a lot of people in this group, but as I've kind of worked through trying to figure out like ways to do it, like I kind of do the same thing that you do, is like I have the files, but what I would do, or I have like those files, but instead of like putting all of those like tests that I want to run, so like, you know, you have your R markdown file, and then like you kind of have this expectation of how your function is going to work or how you're going to use it. And so I've really gotten into the habit of just create a test file for that function, and then start putting your expectations in that test file. Because, you know, if you're using your function how you want to in the test file, then you might be able to convert those expectations into formalized tests. Now, I've kind of gotten into the bad habit of leaving junk in my test files that I have to go back and write formalized tests for. But, you know, it's just kind of that thinking of like, you know, you have these expectations of how your functions are working. So you should have this like file that you're using to like run your functions as if they were going to be like you would use them. And so kind of similar to what you do, but like for me, I've just been like create a test file, dump those expectations of how the function is supposed to use, and then maybe create formalized tests later too. But
yeah, definitely. I find it can be helpful in debugging to already have the test sort of there, and then as you're changing things maybe elsewhere, and unbeknownst to you, you're messing up with the test, you're sort of aware of it earlier, right? So yeah, having some expectation about what it should be doing early on is definitely a good thing to throw into a test.
and then too, like you know, and also too, I think there was another so like the previous group that did this, so John Harmon did I think he covered this chapter maybe 5 or 6, and it's a really good video, because what he does is, and I thought this was kind of an interesting workflow, is he starts off with a vignette, writes a script for what he wants to do, you know, documents that script using that vignette, and then starts converting that script into a specific function, and start functionizing that script. So not only are you developing the documentation while you're developing that script, but then you're going back and then like converting that script code into the specific functions within the package. So you're getting like a, you know, double value, where you're developing your documentation for what you want it to do, and then you're also functionizing it. So I highly suggest that video. I can link it for the group, because it was just kind of a really interesting take on like, you know, his approach to his workflow as well. So I'm dominating the conversation, so if anybody wants to add anything, please do.
That's interesting, starting with the vignette and then splitting it up. It's probably a good idea, because you'd sort of probably replicate your normal analytic workflow better, rather than making these functions thinking you're going to need them later. Right.
I thought it was just kind of neat, because like a lot of the work that I do is just, it's a lot of data wrangling stuff. It's like scripts are good to kind of get that data wrangling process done, but to standardize it, it's more like you take all that script and then you just convert it into a function, and then you offload all of that, script into a function that you could just call the function. And then you just get the documentation, which is, I'll post the link to John Harmon's presentation on this subject, because I thought it was an interesting take, on how to kind of use vignettes for your package development. So. Cool. What else do people have? I have a couple other things that I want to share, because this stuff is fun, but I don't want to dominate the conversation here.
I was going to add to the topic of there's a workflow where you add like, what's the word called in GitHub, where you have like problems with your code, and so you breadcrumb points that you keep notes on, and it works better if you're in a larger development environment, more team members, because it keeps everyone else on task with a wish list of, hey, I got a problem here. Can you help figure out what it is? I'm not familiar with, being able to imply it, et cetera. If anybody were to watch my development environment outside of the actual package itself, or actual anything that I'm working on, I have other notes outside of the service, and it does make it difficult to relate the two together. So oftentimes you'll see that I have like a notes for self, or notes for me type markdown file that I'll just argue with myself of whatever it is that's going on. I like, Rex, your breakpoints or these return statements, similar to what Colin was mentioning about the breakpoint, where you run the code, you have an additional document that you're just running that particular function inside to expect a return. You're not incurring the entire cost of the process itself, or the check function, incurring the cost of a entirety running all of the validation steps, et cetera. It's only checking that one point that you need to validate for confirmation before you move on to the next task. I found that valuable. I hadn't considered that as an option within the actual package development itself. That makes sense.
So on the topic of like naming, so I think my favorite kind of like name for a package that I've seen, I'm going to share my screen here real brief. Let's go number 3. So if you go through the list, there's like these 3 packages that are called Steve. You have Steve Data, Steve Door, Steve Miscellaneous, Steve Templates. And so this person created, the creator's name is Steve. And so Steve Miscellaneous is Steve's miscellaneous functions. So I thought that was really interesting that this person, Steve, created these packages that are on Crayon that are Steve's. And so I've never dove into like what they are, but this package is available if you are interested in using, Steve's functions. So I thought that was a kicker one day when I was just scrolling through and I was looking, I was like, oh, Steve. So you can name your package anything. You can name it after yourself if you want. I mean, I might put my initials on mine. I don't know. So just a heads up on that. And then the other thing that I've noticed recently with that Crayon has been doing, I saw this on Twitter, probably about 3 weeks ago, but Crayon now has a specific section called Crayon Task Views. And so what this is it's what people are doing is they're trying to put different packages under certain categories. And so if there's something that you do, continually, or something that you're interested in, like, I don't know, if you're interested in doing like psychometric stuff, these task views now are putting together like documentation of all the different packages that fall underneath that specific task. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing that Crayon is doing now, because if you are doing something like, machine learning, you could get all of the packages that are associated with machine learning organized for you and get kind of a brief snippet of how they all kind of relate to each other. So I thought that was really, really neat. So I saw that on Twitter probably about 3 weeks ago. So it's just it's under task views. Click on that, and then you'll get all the different task views that are available to you. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
So when you're submitting your package to Crayon, do you like submit a little blurb about your package that will go in this description, or do they do that?
Yeah, I think that's in the description file. You have like a,
I see.
maybe I should bring that up.
I did once have a Twitter thread on submitting packages to Crayon, and one package author mentioned that it's like sometimes nice to like add a little note as to like, why does this package exist? Like not within the package documentation, but just generally. I'll find the tweet and so that you can take it.
Cool. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add, or any other additional questions for Rex? Well, I appreciate everybody joining in tonight. We still have a couple more minutes if people want to kind of hang out and discuss some more stuff, or just want to chat about anything else. I'll kind of hang out here. Just to kind of give you a heads up, next week, Brendan, you said you would take the responsibilities for chapter 6. So if you need any help with that, or if you need any assistance, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to help out. So with that, I mean, we can hang out a little bit more and chat a little bit more. Other than that, I think that's everything that we have for this evening. So thanks, Rex. Really appreciate it. And then everybody have a good night. So yeah. I mean, we can hang out. We can hang out and talk some more. Like we definitely have some time to do that, but I don't want to hold anybody just for my amusement. So,
Rex, I wanted to apologize for being late to the session. I was sidebarring with Colin. I went to the golfing range with the family, whacked some golf balls, got out some frustration, and we had dinner after. So I told Colin, I said, I live literally 3 minutes away. So I was posting to him saying, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 2 seconds. So sorry for the intrusion 10 minutes after the presentation was started.
Oh, no worries. Hope you had a good night.
Yeah,
Sounds
it was a lot of fun for sure.
I've never actually played full-size golf. I've only played putt-putt.
Oh yeah, no. My joke with the family and everybody else is I have zero aim, so I can hit the ball, but you better make sure that there's no cars driving by, because I'll end up hitting your windshield. I have no aim with my driving, that's for sure. So, but.
I like that example that you shared with like the load all with the RC with the C++ code, because I've never worked with anything that had required compiled code, and so now it just makes a lot of sense, like the benefit for load all, because yeah, you're right, like it would take so much time to recompile all that every single time. And so that was kind of a really good example, because at first I was sitting there, I was like, yeah, well, it's not too bad to install, but then like when you think about it, like there's other like code that you might have in your package that's going to really slow it down. And so nothing is more soul sucking than like having to sit there and wait to get your console available, so I appreciate that example.
Yeah, definitely a time sink, and yeah, frustrates me too. I want to be the limiting factor, not the computer, right?
I'm trying to find that video for everybody, because I think John Harmon did an excellent job of like showing that kind of workflow using like vignettes. It was such a neat idea. So.
Colin, was it related to dependencies, checking the vignettes or checking for dependencies? Is that the relationship?
No, basically it's like, so the way I understood it is like when I watched the video, and again, John can speak better to this, and the video will do a better job than I can explain it. But basically, the way I understand it is he starts off with the task of like, anytime he's going to do package development, it starts with a vignette. So I think it's like documentation, or like, what do they call it? Like documented oriented workflow or something, like, or documented focused development or something. So it's like they start with a vignette and then they walk through their process. So create a script, you know, starting from A to whatever, A to Z. And then once you have your process all the way done, then they go through it, and then they functionize that entire process into a function. So they're just like taking everything that's in that vignette and that script and then just functionizing it. Because you might identify certain buckets of things that you're doing, like this is wrangling, this is modeling, this is visualization, and then creating those like, you know, different functions that you need. And then you just put it back into your vignette with those functions. And then you have on top of it, the documentation, and then your functions that go with that documentation. I thought it was really neat. I'm going to find it right now. So,
but that's a good comment. So the first thing that comes to mind is whiteboarding, being able to, you know, draw out exactly what what the package is doing, right? So kind of just storyboarding your ideas of what you want everything to occur. And then the next stage in that documentation is UML drawing, which UML is usually where you start to get your function names and, you know, what relationship or what dependencies isn't the right word, what manipulation you're doing within that particular function, and then how that is related or sending that output to another service or another function, et cetera. The thought that comes to mind is C++, just whenever you're drawing anything, but UML documentation is specific for databasing. It's specific for object-oriented programming. It's specific for, you know, quite a bit of these more complex logic steps. It's building a workflow. And because the fact that it's in a textual form or a visual form, you can kind of move things around, edit it as you need, and you're not in that moment of actual coding yet. So the expectation of running a particular code, whatever function you're writing, and then having something break or, you know, go sideways on you, trying to figure out debugging why that occurrence is happening. So it's a good point.
So Isabella, yes, I haven't read this one from Emily Ryder just yet. Reader. I'm mispronouncing her name, so I do apologize if she's watching this later, but because I know she's pretty prolific in package development and stuff. So yeah, it's the look, just scanning over, it looks like the same process, but here's the video that kind of, I think, would accompany this as well. It's just good to kind of see it visually and how, hopefully this is the one. Yep. So it's kind of that same process. And like John kind of walks through his steps of how to do it, of how he converts a script to a package, because that's the way I view it, right? Like that's how I started, was in my R development. It was always like, when I first started, it's creating scripts, right? I never thought of packages or functions. It was always like, just create these scripts. And then it's just kind of neat to see how you can still use that development workflow, but then use it to create functions. And so I thought it was kind of neat. Again, it takes a little bit more work because you're writing it out, you're writing your vignette, you're taking the time to look through the steps, but you know, I think you get a bonus because you get your documentation with it too. So I might, maybe I might reach out to John and ask him politely if he would come in and take on this chapter, or maybe discuss this one time with the book club. So I know he's expressed interest in maybe joining in a couple sessions, but I know he's a busy person, so I don't want to commit him into something.
Colin, have we, in this particular book club, in the time that we've been together, I don't think anybody's talked about the RStudio conference coming up in July, the end of July. The RStudio conference, Isabella, add in your 2 cents to the subject as needed. But I think the end of July in DC, they're having the RStudio conference. John will be hosting, or supporting one of the actual development tasks. I'm not using the words properly. It's one of the workshops. That's what I was thinking of. He's going to be moderating or assisting in one of the workshops for the RStudio conference. So I know he's in the midst of development for that at the moment too.
Have any of you been to that conference before, or are you going this year?
Over there, I'd love to see all of you. And I went in 2018 as an attendee. A lot of fun.
I got the approval to spend the funds, so I guess I'm on recording now, so now I have to do it. So I'm gonna try my best to make it there. Obviously, situations are fluid, so hopefully things that are happening in the world, can maintain to be the status quo right now. Well, I hope things can improve, but yeah, I'm gonna try my best to be there. So that will be my first one. I'm very interested in being there. So I guess that's a lock. I'm locked in now. Someone can point that and be like, you're locked in. You told everybody on recording, but so.
I haven't.
I was just, oh,
yeah,
go ahead,
Colin, sorry.
Ryan.
No, I was
Well,
going to say, I was joking. I haven't asked for funding yet. I was going to do it completely personal. And if I did that, I choked at the cost of the conference without any without any support. It would be very costly to attend the conference. I'm still trying to figure out a way that I could wrap that into some form of justification somewhere along the lines. But
I got lucky because I'm an adjunct instructor, so I got approved for the educational rate, so that definitely helped, which is great. And I think Brendan, you're a student, right? So I think you might get the student rate. I think there's a student rate too. So if you're interested.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I've been accepted into grad school. I haven't started yet, so I don't know if it counts, but I have an email, so maybe that'll be enough proof.
They have an email, like a support email, and I think Isabella could probably answer better than I can, but there's a support email that I just emailed my situation and said, I'm an adjunct instructor, does this apply? They were quick to respond. Within I think 12 hours they responded to me, so they can give you the heads up.
Okay.
But Isabella could give you better than I can.
Oh yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to message me and I'll get you an answer.
I've seen this blog post before, the R Markdown driven development, and I read it one time and I didn't fully understand it. But now I think if I read through it after seeing like John's video, I think I'll understand it a lot better now. So I think I'm gonna reread this because it looks really well put together. And so it's Emily Ryder, right? I think that's I feel so bad if I'm mispronouncing it, but because I know I've seen some other of her talks, and so apologies if I mispronounce it. So anybody in the future is watching this, don't at me, please. But this one looks really good. I'm gonna have to double read this. So. Cool. Well, that's all I have. Like I said, I can hang out maybe for a couple more minutes if anybody wants to chat about anything else, but other than that, no.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next week.